As someone who grew up watching wrestling in April of 2008, I am very, very glad that Sting made his debut this year in November of 2014, only days removed from when I filmed this, as opposed to in 2008, 2009, or any of the other times he could have jumped ship over to WWE. I still would have marked out because I still would have known who Sting was, but definitely would not have been as special had it happened a lot sooner. I mean, it sounds super to say that Sting shouldn't have debuted years ago, even though I think he probably should have jumped ship when they bought out WCW back in '01. But I think the whole time that he waited to jump ship to WWE to 2014 at the age of 50 something, I think is absolutely surreal, and I think it's in a weird way kind of a good thing that he waited this long to debut, even for personal reasons. Let me backtrack here a little bit. Even going back to 2008, I started watching TNA, and I've talked about this in past video blogs. I started watching an Impact Wrestling, TNA Wrestling, whatever you want to call it, in August of 2008. So that was kind of when I was first exposed to the Sting character, seeing him in TNA and stuff like that. And by that point, I kind of knew of his WCW background. I was not a hardcore fan at that time, but still, though, had he jumped ship right after '08 or '09, like I said before, I would not have appreciated the WWE move as much. I would not have marked out as much as I did at Fast Sunday at Survivor Series. But shortly after getting used to him in TNA, it kind of dawned on me, because by that point, long before I started watching wrestling in April of 2008, we had a Nintendo 64. We've had a Nintendo 64 for close to like 15 years now. But my grandmother had one in her basement, and she still does to this day. She has it in her basement, and we play every time we go over there, every few months or so. And among the games that she has WWF No Mercy, which she has always had, but I didn't start playing it until like late '08 when I first became a wrestling fan. And she's always had WCW versus NWO No Mercy. Not No Mercy, Revenge. WCW versus NWO Revenge. Two amazing games, and I still put at the top of my favorite, on the list of my favorite video games, favorite wrestling video games to this very day. If only because the gameplay is amazing, the list of characters to choose from is great. Some of the storylines, I don't even try to do story mode, just the matches, the arenas, and stuff like that. It's just so simple. That's why it's so much fun. Even more so than some of the current games coming out for Wii and Xbox 360, PS3, whatever. The new gen, the next gen, whatever. Still, though, that was when I was very first exposed to Sting. Even long before I started watching TNA. Because I remember when I used to play that WCW versus NWO Revenge game. And my grandmother, by the way, would not buy these games. They were handed down to her from an older cousin of mine who was, I think, is 10 years older than me. He used to be a big wrestling fan growing up in the late 1990s, so he was a big Monday Night War fan, hence why he had the WWF No Mercy game, as well as the WCW versus NWO Revenge game. So you had a little bit of both of the Monday Night Wars there, and throughout my entire childhood, whenever I would go over to my grandmother's house, I would always play that WCW game, and I had no idea what wrestling was. I was not even a fan, but among the characters that I would most play as was Sting, because I remember Sting's entrance in that game was unlike anyone other's. Of course, Sting is very much known for his bat entrance and ascending from the rafters, which he did have in that game. Even in 1990, they had the technology to pull that off. Sting and battle royals that we would do would always descend from the ceiling and come down in the middle of that ring with the bat and just start attacking people with it. I think the only other person in that game that came to the ring with a weapon was La Parka with the steel chair. But I always remember Sting for that sole reason. He always came down to the ring with the steel bat, with the wooden bat, whatever it was. Aluminum bat, whatever you want to call it. For that reason alone, I always played as Sting. I always remembered Sting. So when I first saw him in TNA all those years later, when I first officially became a wrestling fan, was absolutely surreal to see it come that far. So that was the first time I was exposed to the Sting character in WCW versus NWO Revenge for Nintendo 64 all these years ago, before I even officially became a fan. And watching TNA, I became more exposed to its work and stuff like that. And I think it wasn't really until early 2011 when rumors of Sting's impending WWE first caught fire. And even back then, it was very unlikely to see Sting in WWE. I think his TNA contract had just run out around Bound for Glory 2010 time. He left the company in late 2010. And rumors really started kicking up going to WrestleMania 27, since that show would be in Atlanta, WCW country, and made for the most sense to bring in Sting. And of course, speculation really heated up on I think it was the final day of January, or one of the final days of January, late January 2011, I should say. when they aired that vignette around the cabin, and you see the trench coat and these black boots walking into a cabin, and everyone thought, myself included, thought it was Sting. And you would see the numbers 2/21/2011, which would the night after the Elimination Chamber, and of course it would end up being the Undertaker. That became apparent over time, but a lot of people wondered for years and years and years whether that vignette was meant for Sting before he turned down their offer and instead went back to TNA. Because after those vignettes ran their course in late February, he was back in TNA by early March. He returned. They mocked that promo for TNA. I thought that was asinine. They did a promo similar to that, if you remember. If you can even remember it if you're a TNA fan. It said March 3rd, 2013. And he was walking in the ring and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, it was a playoff of his old WCW vignettes. But still, though, I thought it was very stupid, and it seemed a lot like the 221 videos that they would show on Raw in early 2011. But still, though, he was back in TNA by that point. I was very disappointed that he didn't jump ship, and I thought that was his final chance to make it over to WWE, because at that age, I mean, he was already 50-something by that point. So at that point, I really didn't think there was any real chance of him coming over to WWE. But I was very disappointed, and I don't think it would be until Sting did an interview, I think either later that year or the following year, that he did indeed reveal that he did have talks with WWE in early 2011. And I don't know if they made, I can't remember exactly what he said, in that I don't know if he turned down the offer after the vignettes were made and they made those vignettes for Sting, or if he turned down the offer long before those vignettes were made and they were always meant for The Undertaker and they just wanted to do them to stir up speculation. I can't really remember exactly. But still, though, I was just very disappointed. I just remember being very, very disappointed that Sting never really officially made his debut in WWE at that time. So you fast forward a couple years later to 2012, I think, or 2013. He signed a few extension deals over the last couple of years. When he signed another extension deal, I was very sad to see that, because that was his last opportunity to come to WWE. And then his contract expired in early 2014, and I was ecstatic, and I was really hoping he wouldn't go back like he did in 2010, 2011, and he didn't. His last match came against Magnus on an episode of TNA in January, a shitty-ass match and a terrible way to send off the Icon, a guy that has basically made TNA. He's not an AJ Styles, but he's pretty much been there since the beginning, and since like 03, 04, whatever. He's been there for a very, very long time, and he really helped make the company what it has become today. And that's how you send him off. I thought that was pretty lame. But I was making the joke after that, are we going to see Undertaker versus Sting at WrestleMania? And by that point, it was way too late to bring in Sting for WrestleMania season, and rumors started kicking up that he had not officially signed a contract, and the two parties hadn't signed a deal yet, and all this other kind of stuff. And I was really hoping he would make a debut at the not Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, at WrestleMania 30, and he didn't, because there were rumors that he might have been in the area, and he was at a Comic-Con over the weekend, saying that 31 is his favorite number, and you go back and watch that video on YouTube, it might still be up, I'm not sure, and the crowd goes crazy, and I think they start chanting yes, and that they really wanted to see Sting debut at WrestleMania, or the next night on Raw, and build to an Undertaker-Sting match at WrestleMania 31, and the next night on Raw, everyone was looking forward to Sting's debut. They thought if there was any chance, any place for Sting to debut, it would be on that show. And of course it did not come, and that show was so amazing that I did not even mind it whatsoever, because we got so many great stuff that night, so much great stuff that I didn't really mind Sting not showing up. But it would be revealed. I mean, rumors kept on going back and forth, back and forth. It became a running gag after a while, whether Sting would officially sign with WWE or not. They sent a contract to Sting. He didn't sign it. They're talking. He hasn't signed a deal yet. All this other kind of stuff. Really, really confusing. And it really wouldn't become official until the summer of 2014, just a couple of months ago, when it was announced that he would be a part of the WWE 2K15 video game, his very first video game for WWE. So that was amazing. To see that commercial air on Raw was great. Very well done commercial. And he would do, I think he did some contract signings for WWE, or not contract signings, autograph signings. I know he was at Comic-Con over the summer. So it really became pretty much official by that point that Sting would be in WWE. It was all but confirmed. And it wasn't until Survivor Series this past week that it became official. Now, the news broke on Friday, that I think it was, that Sting would be at Survivor Series. I failed to look at the dirt sheets. I saw the headline. The headline that I saw on lordsofpain.net said that huge names scheduled to debut at Survivor Series. And how many huge names out there are scheduled to debut at Survivor Series? Unless your name is Kevin Steen, I don't think it's going to be anyone else but Sting. So I pretty much knew at that point, even though I didn't read the report, I pretty much knew it was Sting, and people were talking about it all over Twitter. So it was pretty much all, it was pretty much unavoidable. And I'm not going to blame anyone but myself. I mean, it's not even really my fault because it was all over the place. I'm not going to log off of Twitter until Survivor Series. It's ridiculous because I need to keep up to date on all this other kind of stuff. But still, though, Survivor Series came, and a lot of people were tweeting, "We're Sting, we're Sting, and we're Sting." And I went back and read the report from before the show aired, after he made his debut, and that there was a report going around that he was going to debut right after the Divas elimination match. I guess it was. That would have been a real odd buffer in between matches, and there's no way that you can come back from Sting making his WWE debut. So I was so glad that he made his debut in the main event and not in the middle of the fucking show. Like, that would have been really, really random. So I was very, very glad that didn't come to fruition. But by the end of the show, by the time the main event came around, I knew someone was going to interfere, whether it be Randy Orton or Sheamus or someone. I had false hope that it would be Sting. I pretty much thought that someone let out the cat out of the bag, that Sting was going to show up at the show, in that they really just wanted to kind of build hype, build buzz for the pay-per-view, and that he was not actually going to debut. It didn't really make much sense to have him debut in the main event, so I thought it was going to be Randy Orton coming down. So Scott Armstrong making the 1, 2, 3 count for Seth Rollins. Before he can even make the 2 count, Sting's music hits, or his new WWE music, which I very much love. And maybe it's just me, because I was not really exposed all that much to his WCW theme music, so I really have no problem with them changing it. That's just me, though. But still, though, he comes out, the Titantron, the reaction he received was insane. You go back and watch that video on YouTube, which I think has since been removed, which sucks. There was a fan video taken from within the arena when he came out. They go crazy. Easily the top moment, if not one of the top moments from 2014 this year. He comes out, the awesome stare down with Triple H, lays him out with the Scorpion Death Drop, and people are making, like, bitching and moaning that he looks old, his hair looks gross, he looks gross. I mean, the guy's 50 fucking something years old. What do you expect? And for a guy that age, he looks to be in great shape. And I know he wrestled with a t-shirt on in TNA. I was not the biggest Sting fan in TNA. I hated the Joker shit that he did in 2011. I hated that with a passion. But I was just so glad to see him finally make his WWE debut. That said, though, I think he's right where he belongs, and that WWE is the perfect company to kind of build him up with all these vignettes and stuff like that. But I know, like I said before, I know he might not have the best of matches in WWE, but my belief is he's only going to have one match at WrestleMania. If he has more than that, if he has more matches than that, that's great. That's awesome. I would love to see more Sting matches other than one just at WrestleMania. But still, though, I think for a guy, like in TNA, he was wrestling every single fucking week, so of course he's going to wear a t-shirt. He's not going to be in the best of shape. So hopefully now that he's had enough time to train and stuff like that, that won't be the case. So we'll just have to wait and see. Still, though, it was an absolute surreal moment, as I've seen other people point out in other websites and stuff like that. That Sting's debut was a moment in time in WWE that fans will never experience again, and I could not agree more. I mean, we'll experience other things like that in WWE. I'm not saying it's never going to get better than that, because it absolutely could be. But you'll never experience something that surreal at a WWE event, let alone a pay-per-view like Survivor Series. To debut at the same event that the likes of Kurt Angle, The Rock, The Shield, and of course The Undertaker, a dream match that we've all been waiting to see for years upon years upon years, a lot longer than I have been, because I started watching in 08. People have been waiting to see this for nearly 15 years. It was just amazing, made for a monumental, historic moment in time that, like people have said, will never be replicated in WWE history. As for a Sting Undertaker match, if it happens, I'm all for it. If we get a Triple H Sting match instead, I'm all for it. As long as we see Sting in a WWE match at least once, I'm content. So I very much look forward to seeing Sting in WWE. And all I can really say is, welcome to WWE, Sting.